Hey, what's up guys? So today we're going to be going over the rarest items in Diablo 3. We're going to be talking about the rarest legendaries more specifically because there are a bunch of really cool transmogs that are super rare and barely anyone has, like for example the wings of Kokopil, which were some wings that were removed in the game. However, I do want to mention that there are lots of cool transmogs like the cosmic wing butterflies, and while these are cool transmogs, I just want to kind of go ahead and go over the legendary items in the game. In fact, there are so many other cool things that you can get in the game that are not essentially going to be really like best in slot, that are still considered legendaries, and some are only acquired by going into very specific areas like the Herodric Hamburger, Spectrum, or even like the Murlocket. We're not going to be covering those. While those are quite rare, they're very specific in the game and they require you to do kind of like an Easter egg or like a little event kind of a thing to go ahead and acquire, just like the cosmic butterfly wings. However, I do want to go ahead and just state that I do want to make a video covering all of the Easter egg items like the Murlocket and all of those things in the future, but this is basically going to be kind of a video going over the rarest items in the game, and we have to kind of go over some rules first. So first off, this will not cover any legacy items. Legacy items meaning like the game before Diablo 3 had its expansion pack, there were items that you can actually get, for example like Manticore, that would actually roll double sockets, or you can have sockets in your boots. So a lot of these rare legacy items, if you guys are interested in that, technically this would be the rarest item in the game, these legacy items. And I did make a video specifically going over that, and if you guys are interested in that, definitely go ahead and check that down below. But I just wanted to go ahead and kind of set up some rules first, and also mention that depending on the class that you play, certain items will be obviously more rare. For example, if you are playing on a Necromancer, getting an amulet for a monk would actually be one of the rarest things that you can actually do. I don't want to go ahead and use that as the rule for this video. This video is kind of serving a purpose to kind of go over some of the more sought after items, but also kind of go over what is technically the rarest in the game, because in Diablo, an amulet is actually the rarest drop in the game because they have to roll as the item type and then legendary, and then it rolls through the list of legendaries, while some having a smaller drop chance. And I just want to mention that at certain levels, items will not drop. We're all going to be considering for this video that the character is level 70 and is at least playing at a torment difficulty, because certain difficulties won't drop certain items as well. So just so we can kind of set up some rules over here before someone comments below and be like, well, technically at this level this item could be more rare. So just to kind of cover those rule sets over here. And also want to mention that this video won't specifically cover every single weapon for all classes. I do want to make a video going over that, and I have to set this rule here because otherwise this video would actually be quite terrible. In fact, I was actually looking up for other content creators' videos on the rarest items, and the thing is that theoretically most of them would actually be weapons, and actually most of them would just be amulets. But the reason why is because the way we're going to set up this video is to kind of not cover every single weapon. And the reason why is because what would actually happen if you covered just straight up the rarity and the drop chance, you would actually be covering a lot of bad weapons that are just legendaries, because there are so many. For example, the picture that you guys can see over here is showing how many things can drop in the weapon category for the Necromancer, as weapons are much harder to actually roll as a drop in the game than, let's say, a chest piece or gloves or any of those things. The thing is because Necromancer has so many, it actually messes up the data for a lot of the rarest weapons. So to kind of serve this as a purpose, technically there are a lot of different ways to also acquire weapons in the game, and I just want to go ahead and mention that as a heads up. We're going to be also kind of factoring Kadala as well as the Hope of Cain recipe that you can use in Kanai's cube. So again, I know there's a lot of rules to this video, but I just have to state them first off. And again, I want to mention that I will cover all the weapons in a separate video, because otherwise it would make this list completely unfair. We will cover some weapons, and that is due to them being super rare for that class, because there's so many either weapons in that category and it has a very low drop chance. And I do want to also say, just because the item is rare, it does not mean that it's good. If you guys have played Diablo 2, you know Tyrael's Might is a very rare item. However, it's just not really that great. So anyways, that said, let's go ahead and finally get started with this video. So At number 10 over here, we have the Wand of Woe. What this allows you to do is, if you're playing Wizard, when you activate Explosive Blast, you're going to have additional 3 blasts that are triggered after casting it. Most people run the Fire Rune one, so it's going to go ahead and explode multiple times. Every single time the Fire one explodes, it explodes actually 3 times, and then each time it fires off, it's going to fire an additional set of explosions here. The next one up is actually kind of a tie between 3 different items for the Witch Doctor. This is going to be the Sacred Harvester, the Renho Flare, and the Star Metal Cookery. So what the Sacred Harvester does is it makes it so you can stack your Soul Harvest up to 10 times, and then the Renho Flare allows the Plague of Toads to now seek enemies and explode twice. And then with the Star Metal Cookery, you're going to be able to reduce the cooldown of Fetish Army and Big Bad Voodoo by 1 second each time your fetishes deal damage. It's almost kind of like a Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac for those skills. And then next up over here, we actually happen to have the Little Rogue and the Slanderer. And these items are actually kind of tied with another item that will also be in the number 8 spot here. So the Little Rogue and the Slanderer are pretty much only really seen as like a item that you equip on a Whirlwind Barb, although they technically can roll main stat for every single class in the game, which is interesting because some of the classes, for example, like Wizard, you can't dual wield, so it's almost pointless. Maybe they'll update it in the future, but I really doubt it. But it's very interesting that you can still actually roll main stat, although it's pretty much, again, just used on Whirlwind Barb. It's actually the best in slot for currently this season. Now, like I said, in the 8th spot, it's actually basically tied with the Fizz of Astarask, and that is an Exploding Palm buff, so it makes it so Exploding Palms on Death Explosion is increased by 400 to 500%, so it's another multiplier on that. Now at number 7 over here, we're going to be actually taking a look at the Bakula Jungle Wraps. This makes it so Fire Bats deal additional damage to enemies affected by Locust Swarm or Piranhas. Surprisingly, these are more rare than what was at number 8. I would really thought that Little Rogue and the Slanderer would be more rare, and simply just due to the cost of the Death's Breath creation of these with the Hope of Cain, this actually is just a little bit more rare, and that's because there are so many different belts, and this one just has a more rare chance to actually roll. So, like I said before, certain items will be more difficult to roll. While it's a lot easier to roll a belt than, let's say, some swords in the game, the thing is we're kind of factoring in a lot of different things, not only like, for example, the Death's Breath, which in this case we're taking into consideration, but because these are just more rare and there's so many other belts in the category that will have essentially the same amount of chance to roll, they're just going to be simply more rare. Next up over here, this is actually a Necromancer chest armor called the Bloodsong Mail. And its legendary ability is, while in the Land of the Dead, command skeletons deal 100 to 125% additional damage and gains the effect of Enforcer, Frenzy, Dark Mending, and Freezing Grasp runes. And then at number 5 over here, we have the Countess Julia's cameo over here. So this is an item that lets you prevent all arcane damage and heal yourself for 20 to 25% of the amount prevented. So these just really don't see any play. There's a lot of these similar mechanics on amulets here, but again, they simply just don't see some play, unfortunately. And at number 4, we actually have Unity. So like I mentioned before, technically amulets are more rare, but for some reason the Countess Julia's actually has a very high drop chance compared to Unity, which is actually a pretty decent ring, and I think that this one definitely does see some play with some builds, especially with some people pushing on the Solar Crater Rifts. But that's going to be at number 4. And at number 3 over here, we actually have Skull Grasp. Now, for I don't know what reason, this ring is very, very rare in the game. Whirlwind is a very popular barbarian ability. However, the thing that makes Whirlwind good, at least in the Season 19, is that you're going to be dealing a bunch of damage with Rend. The damage that you deal with Rend won't really help out with the bonus that you get with Skull Grasp, because that only increases the damage of Whirlwind. So do not try to utilize this because it's completely pointless if you're just trying to actually deal damage via Rend. But it is one of the more rare rings in the game. In fact, it's actually the second most rare ring, because at number 2 we actually have Circle of Neluge. This actually does see quite a bit of play with a lot of Necromancer builds, and it has a secondary ability to make it so when you raise a Skeleton Mage, you're going to raise an additional one, and they last an additional 2 to 4 seconds over here. And also do want to go ahead and, before we get into number 1, mention a quick shout out to the Royal Ring of Grandeur. Now, as far as the bounties go, a lot of this data that I'm providing with you guys, by the way, is stuff that is found in the community, and I'll link all my sources down below. But as far as I can tell, I've seen a lot of people complain about them farming for so long and never getting this ring. For me, it's not that difficult, but again, your RNG may differ. However, via the Diablo wiki, it says that this is one of the items that is more rare to actually drop out of the bounty. So those of you guys that haven't actually gotten it in a long time, or your drop chance is really low on it, maybe it's actually because there is a lower drop chance. Again, there's no official Blizzard post on any of these numbers, but this one is definitely going to be at number 1. And what's interesting is the number 1 result, guys, is actually a tie between 4 different items. And I know it sounds crazy, but that's the results over here. Anyways, so it's a bunch of the amulets that actually change the damage that you'll be taking and actually healing yourself from for some amount. So the Star of Askarnoth over here is going to prevent all the fire damage and heal yourself for a percentage of the amount prevented. And then we also happen to have the Talisman of Arachnok, and that's going to prevent all of the cold damage, and it's going to heal you for a percentage of the amount prevented. And again, I know that these just don't see any play here, and it's kind of disappointing, but next up we have Furion Amulet, and that's going to prevent all of the lightning damage and heal you for a percent of the amount prevented. And over here, again, these are all tied for the rarity in the rolls here. So Mara's Kaleidoscope over here prevents all of the poison damage, and you get to heal for 10 to 15% of the amount prevented over there, which is actually pretty interesting because in Diablo 2, this is actually one of the better amulets. I would argue that is one of the best amulets in the game that is a unique or legendary, if you will, in Diablo 2. But in Diablo 3, unfortunately, just preventing that poison damage doesn't really help out too much. I really wish it was more similar in the abilities that it had from Diablo 2. But anyways, guys, there it is. The list of all the rarest legendary items. And I know I didn't go over the weapons of every single class. I do want to make that a separate video. The reason why, again, is because the weight of the weapons on most of them would just outclass, and it would make the video a lot, I would say, less entertaining. But technically, yes, there's a lot of weapons that would have a higher chance for certain classes, and there's a lot of other things to factor in. So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that as a heads up, because we also did factor in the Death's Breath creation of items and blood shards, because again, there's a lot of different ways. I also want to mention really quick that as far as getting the item in Ancients or Primal Ancients, those are going to go ahead and technically, yes, be also more rare. As far as that number goes, I'm like pretty sure, because again, there is an official Blizzard post on this, but there's been a lot of data from the community, and again, I'll link that as a source below. But as far as getting a ancient item, it seems like it's about 10%, and then to get a primal, it's about 2 to 2.5% chance to actually get them to be primal. So anyways, guys, there it is, the rarest items in the game as far as a constructive list goes. Again, I know that we did not cover all of the weapons because it would cover a lot of these trash weapons because they are harder to technically roll in the game because certain classes will have so many different roles. And again, I will make that a separate video, so if you guys want to go ahead and check that out in the future, I'll be making it kind of going over the rarest weapons in every single class, but I kind of wanted this to be more of a blanket video because certain classes will have certain items that are just far more difficult to roll, and that is simply because they have a lot of, let's say, amulets or ring in that category, and that's how that list is actually created here. But anyways, hopefully this video helped you guys out and maybe understand, maybe learn something new, because I actually really wanted to check this out, and I couldn't find anyone on YouTube that created a video going over these. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good one, and like I said, if you guys want to check out the actual most rarest items in the game that you can't get anymore, I will go ahead and link the video on that, which goes over the legacy items. But thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one, and I'm signing out. Peace.